There's always a level of fear that comes with trying new things. What if I'm bad at it? What if I don't like it? What if all the tools I bought are a waste? This week's episode is an exploration into that idea. Taking on a project with a lot of uncertainties with the blind confidence that I'll end up with something. Okay, so I swear I'm not crazy, but my car is a little... Here, I'll just show you. Okay, so this is my car's dashboard, or more accurately, the lack thereof. I've removed basically all the plastic trim in this entire vehicle. The goal of this week's project is to rewire all the knobs, dials, and switches into one big control plate in the center. It'll be sort of the anti-Tesla. Instead of one big touchscreen in the middle, it's a bunch of tactile knobs and switches. Now, I've been wanting to tackle this project for a while, but I've sort of been putting it off. It requires two major skills: welding and wiring. I am bad at wiring, and I don't know how to weld at all. The first part of this project is welding some metal brackets to the dashboard frame. I'm not gonna lie, welding looks really cool, but it's a little intimidating. I don't really work with metal much. Even just cutting and bending these brackets was a new thing for me. The other part of this project is rewiring everything to my new switch panel. This involves a lot of taking things apart, desoldering components, and tapping in my own wires. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here. This volume knob, the EQ and head unit, the AC controls, the windows and door locks. I'm messing with a lot of systems here. I think the best way to approach intimidating projects like this is often to dive into the hardest part first. Before I tackle welding, I want to get the audio system sorted out. I'm using this cheap Chinese head unit as a base that I'll tap a bunch of buttons and switches into. It's got a simple 7-segment display, so I should be able to take that off and relocate it to wherever I want. Seems simple enough, but the reason that I don't like wiring is because if you mess one thing up, the whole system might not work. It's not a very forgiving medium. On the other hand, when I'm cutting a hole or something, if I mess up, I've still cut a hole. It's just a little messier than it could have been. But with wiring, it's very hard to tell what you've done wrong. I've wired these 3 buttons to the head unit for previous track, play pause, and next track. Assuming those and the volume knob actually work, we've got the basic inputs for audio now. I want to mount this up and actually test it, so it's time to finally weld those brackets in. I was very uncertain, but after disconnecting the battery and prepping my surfaces, there wasn't much else to do but start shooting sparks and hope for the best. To my surprise, the weld was solid and I didn't light anything on fire. With my first welds being a success, I was actually feeling pretty good. My brackets were rock solid, the plate mounted perfectly. Everything was actually going surprisingly well. Okay, so bad news. The head unit does not power on. I'm gonna have to figure something else out. Pathetically, my solution was a second $20 head unit, which I immediately tore apart out of the box. I plan to not separate the display this time because I think that's what fried the last one. Undoing all the work I just did and leaving the old display on the plate as a scar of my mistake doesn't exactly feel great, but getting flustered and giving up here would be missing the point of the project. I'm doing this for fun, I'm doing this to learn, I'm doing this to get better at things I'm uncomfortable with. Shying away from mistakes is the last thing I'm doing here. And so we move on with the second head unit. With all the buttons wired up and the head unit mounted, it was time for the second attempt's moment of truth. It works! The head unit, the EQ, the play pause buttons, everything works. I have a functional audio system again. Now I just have to put in all the lighting switches, AC controls down here, flesh this out a little more, we'll have a cool little control center. I'm excited. This is where the strategy of tackling all the intimidating tasks first really pays off. I still have a lot of work to do, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The twists and turns are all behind me, at least, hopefully. I just have to rewire the window controls, the door locks, and all the AC dials. The windows and doors were super simple, just 6 basic buttons. The AC knobs, on the other hand, would be a little more complicated. As the knob rotates, it completes the circuit on various points on this ring. So basically, I just have to send a wire to each one of those contact patches and link it up to my new shiny metal dials. Again, seems pretty straightforward, so I just wired up the blower dial and did a quick test. But of course, something managed to go wrong. So I had a suspicion that the wire I used here wasn't going to be thick enough, and as it turns out I was right. The thing did work. I plugged it in, the AC started blowing, but after about 5 seconds, this whole line here just went up in smoke and melted. But in my book, that's a success. I didn't light anything on fire and the AC actually worked. So now I just have to rewire this with a slightly higher gauge. So once again, I have to undo a bunch of work I just did. But this time spirits are high. I know it's gonna work. I know what I need to do. So after a simple rewire, everything was ready to mount on the plate for a final test. I started to mark everything on the panel with these old Dymo style labels. I think the aesthetic matches the old school and improvised nature of this project. There was no plan going into this. There was no sketch, no layout, no measurements. And I think that's a good way to approach uncertain projects like this. I wanted to give myself space to screw up, like I did with the original head unit. I actually don't mind that little 7-segment display being stuck there in the middle. It's a reminder that this wasn't easy, that I did something I was bad at and kept going, even through the failures. Unless you're very gifted, most things are just hard until you get a lot of practice in. So I'm trying not to shy away from things that I'm bad at, because with some patience and persistence, it's possible to make some really cool things. It's so satisfying after all my hard work seeing these buttons and switches actually interface with the car's mechanisms. It's definitely out of the ordinary, but I really like it. It's something I'm going to interact with all the time. This dumb little dashboard will serve as a daily reminder that just because something is intimidating doesn't mean you can't still achieve it. Thank you for your time.